Yes, it is 10 a.m. now. I think it makes sense, as long as we're still waiting for people to join, to start with the more organizational side of the event. So let me begin with quickly introducing myself. My name is Sina Marx. I'm a project coordinator at the German NGO FEMNET. And I would like to also welcome my colleague Jana Borkenhang, who will be helping us with the technical side of this event. Jana, would you maybe start to explain to everyone the way this webinar will work technically, how they can participate and ask questions and all of this?
Yes, welcome from my side. My name is Jana Borkenhagen. I also work for FEMNET. I'm here today to support the technical side of the webinar and also to manage your questions. So as a first information to all of you, the webinar is recorded and also streamed live on YouTube, so that you are informed, but your names are not revealed as long as you are not mentioning your names when you have a contribution later. Coming to this, you are, as participants, you're all muted because we await a huge number of participants. We are very happy about this. Still, we try to allow some participation from your side as well, and this will be done in the following way. When we have the contributions from the speakers today, you will be able to send questions of understanding in written through the button that is called F&A or Q&A that you find at the very bottom of your Zoom meeting. It shows two speaking bubbles. There you can put in your written question that has to do with understanding. We cannot address all of them, but we try after each talk to address 1 to 2 questions in order to clarify that you can also follow the talks. Further, you have the opportunity to always participate in the chat box. That is also a function you find at the bottom of the meeting. There we ask you to share general statements, or maybe you have another link or some information. You can send this there to all other participants. And we will also allow some participation in speaking, and this we will do at the very end. There we will allow an open discussion, and for you to participate in that, you can use the button that is the hand raising function, the digital one. You find this next to your name when you click on the participants list. So you just click it, and then we will organize it and see who we can unmute, so then you can bring your participation in Word. And if you wish not to be mentioned by name when you have a question, then please say so before, so we are sure that everyone is happy. Okay, that's from my side so far. Thank you, Zina.
Okay, thanks so much, Jana. So yeah, maybe just to add to that, both the recording and the presentation will also be available afterwards. Those of you who have registered online, also those who have been declined because the webinar was already full, and who are listening in on YouTube now will receive an email with all information afterwards. For those of you who haven't registered, you can find the recording of the webinar also on the FEMNET YouTube channel. Yeah, so for those of you who don't know us yet, I will give you a very brief introduction to who FEMNET is, what we're doing, and how we came to organize this webinar today, while we're still waiting for the last people to join us in the webinar. So let me share with you a little presentation. I'm going to start. Okay, so, well, FEMNET is a member-based women's rights association based in Germany. We have been founded in 2007, and we work for the economic, social, and cultural rights of women worldwide, with a special focus on garment workers. And we are a member of the Clean Clothes campaign. The CCC is a global network that brings together more than 230 organizations dedicated to improving working conditions and to empowering workers in the global garment sector. Also, the 3 other organizations who are on the panel today are member or partner of the Clean Clothes campaign. And this is also what we are doing at FEMNET. We are campaigning a lot towards improving workers' rights. We do advocacy work in different platforms and initiatives. We do education and counseling at universities, in public speeches, in schools, and so on. And importantly, we do solidarity projects together with our partner organizations in the production countries. So we do joint projects and campaigns with partner organizations in Bangladesh and India. And all three organizations that are on the panel today, we have been working with them for many years and do joint projects on different topics, mainly on women's rights and labor rights. So also it was through them that we first came to know about the desperate situation of garment workers in India and Bangladesh in this time of crisis. But before we will start talking about the impact of the corona pandemic on garment workers, let me begin with saying a few words about why we chose this day today for this webinar. It was exactly 7 years ago today that the Rana Plaza complex collapsed, burying thousands of workers under rubble, killing more than 1,100 workers and leaving more than 2,000 injured, many of them for a lifetime. Ever since, workers, labor rights organizations, unions, and activists worldwide come together on this very day to commemorate the victims of this tragedy and to raise awareness for workers' rights to prevent another tragedy. So it is today the first time since 7 years that none of us actually can go to the streets to raise awareness for workers' rights on this 24th of April. So I'm very happy to see so many familiar names, but also unfamiliar names on the participant list. And of course, as well, our great speakers on the panel today. So we are really happy to see that so many people are interested in this webinar, that actually the webinar was fully booked and we had to live stream on YouTube because so many of you out there want to show that you have not forgotten garment workers and you're interested in their fates today in this crisis. So 7 years after Rana Plaza, we have come here today to discuss how we can prevent the corona pandemic from becoming the next tragedy for garment workers worldwide. Therefore, I would really like to thank our speakers for being here today, despite the difficult times that they and the workers they represent are facing. So let me welcome them and quickly introduce them to you. First of all, Kalpuna Akhter, she's the founder and executive director of the Bangladesh Center for Worker Solidarity, BCWS. She has been a key player in urging Western brands to sign on to the Bangladesh Accord following the Rana Plaza collapse in 2013. She began working herself in garment factories age 12, and since the year 2000 has devoted herself to trade union work and activism for garment workers in the country. For her tireless fight towards improving the lives of garment workers, she was awarded the Human Rights Watch's Award for Extraordinary Activism. Kalpuna, thanks so much for being here today. It's really good to have you on the panel. Let me go to Deepika. Deepika Rao is Program Director at the Bangalore-based NGO Cividep, which works to ensure that businesses comply with national and international standards of human rights and labor rights. With this objective, Cividep studies the effects of corporate activities on communities and also educates workers about their rights. Cividep is mainly active in the garments, electronics, and leather manufacturing industries in South India. Deepika has conducted several research studies on women and migrant workers in the garment industry, also together with FEMNET. So really glad to have you here today, Deepika. Mary Vijakula is Executive Director of SAFE, an NGO in the federal state of Tamil Nadu, also in southern India. She is Program Director of the Labor Resource Center, which facilitates numerous trainings, counselings, awareness-raising programs to educate workers about their rights. And Mary, for more than 15 years now, has been fighting against rights violations, especially of women and children in Tamil Nadu spinning mills and factories. Welcome, Mary. Great to have you here as well. And last but not least, Dr. Gisela Burkhardt is founder and chairwoman of the German NGO FEMNET. FEMNET is a member-based women's rights association, like I just said, and Gisela is representing FEMNET in various initiatives to improve working conditions in the sector, including the German Clean Clothes campaign and the German initiative that strives for legislation for human rights in businesses, the so-called mandatory human rights due diligence. She is also a member of the steering committee of the German Textile Partnership, which is a multi-stakeholder initiative whose private sector members make up for about half of the German textile market. So she can also provide the consumer country's perspective. Welcome, Gisela, and thank you also for initiating this webinar. So you see that we have a very interesting panel and that it will be difficult to give each of our speakers enough time to explain the situation in their respective country. Therefore, let us start right away with a look at the country in which the 24th of April became a date of tragic fame, which is Bangladesh. And I would just give you a brief overview of the garment industry in Bangladesh, which has more than 4 million garment workers, and garments make up about 80% of the country's export earnings, with about, well, it's difficult to say, but more than 4,000 factories in the country. So we see that the garment industry is extremely important to Bangladesh, which is the second largest exporter of garments after China. So with the current corona pandemic, Kalpona, maybe you can talk a little bit about the impact of the pandemic, and when we look at the impact, whether we actually see yet another tragedy for workers unfolding in front of us. Yeah, the floor is yours. Thanks.
Thank you, Gina, and very happy to be joining this webinar. And the situation, soon as the pandemic outbreaks, we were in a fear that what would be happening to our workers. And, from the second week of March, our workers started to get affected by this COVID-19 pandemic as the brand started the canceling orders. Those was for in March and April, which was already in the place, and the workers are making those production. And the brands and retailers, they say they will be not able to receive all these products. And many of them came with a demand that they want to have a 30 to 50% discount. So which is definitely not done at this moment. The brand couldn't show their corporate social responsibility. Rather, they were like very strict to canceling and not to pay the manufacturers for this product. And what impact that our workers are facing out of that? The wages for March 2020 has not been even paid fully till today. So like 5 days ago, we can say 90% of factory, or 3 days ago, 90% of factories has been paid workers, but it's still a 10% or less than 10% factory workers yet not paid. And here, the life is that practical that no money is no food. So workers in here are too fear about losing their job. Our workers are feared to get infected by this virus. Our workers are very feared not to have their wages as they have been experienced in this month, that the manufacturers are not ready with their payment, even they worked. And for month of April, while all factories was closed, they really don't know that whether they will be get paid in next month or not. So this is, how our workers are getting affected by this COVID-19 pandemic. Till now, more than 70% factory, they already has been laid off. They announced laid off. Maybe other country has a different version of their law, but in our version of law says if factories are laid off, workers will still have job, but they will not get paid full month wages. That would be like 60% of their wages they will get, which is not enough for workers. And it also says that workers, those are working less than a year, for that factory, regardless how long they're working in the industry, if they work less than a year, they will not get anything during the laid-off period. And laid-off period can be 30 to 60 days. So that's, just think about that. If workers do not have money, what they will be, eating. And soon as the brand started canceling the order, the factories also started firing workers, especially the workers, those are in a provisionary period, or those are working less than a year. And without, these workers just fired without severances. So they doesn't have money. And these workers will not get job anywhere in next few months or until things become normal. And none of us, knows that when this pandemic will lift up and when our lives will be in a normal situation. So we just mean these workers will be starving in next few days if the manufacturers don't reinstate them, or if government do not take them under the bailout system. So, the consequences of this pandemic, I know that we all are in this, but if we talk about the consequences of the pandemic, how it is for brands and how it is for manufacturers and how it is for workers. For manufacturers, they will be losing fraction of their profit, even if it goes for a few months. The manufacturers, they will be losing their profit share, but not their establishment. But workers, it is very practical for them. They will be losing the job and they will have no money, and no money means no food. Yeah.
Thanks, Kapuna, for this insight. I have one question, because there were so many different numbers out there. So, for example, the Bangladesh Garment Manufacturers and Exporters Association, BGMEA, stated that around 90% of garment workers received their wages for March. But at the same time, other sources report very different numbers. And what we hear from you is also that workers are protesting because they did not receive their wages. So do you have any more detailed information on that?
Yeah, so as I said that, the workers, like over 90% workers got paid, or over 90% factory has been paid workers, but that is just 2 days ago or 1 day ago. So workers supposed to get paid by the first week of this month, the first week of April, but that has not been done. So when workers came when workers was forced to bring in the town to work, despite this pandemic and despite the higher fear of getting infected, the factory has been shut down on April 5th, but haven't given any exact date that when worker will get paid their wages. So few days later, the first date has given that workers will be get paid by 16th, which did not happen. Then the second date was the workers will get paid on 20th. But the workers hadn't had money. They need to buy their grocery. Usually they buy their grocery on day, okay? So when they get wages, they pay the local grocery shop and then get food again. But this time they couldn't pay on time, so workers haven't had money, and their rental, landlords, they were pressing them to pay the rent, their rents. So the workers become frustrated, and they were start protesting in the street, though they knows that there is a high, possibility to get infected, but they hadn't had choice. When they're starving and when their children are starving at home, they thought that it is better to protest. Until they protest, they will not get wages. So they started protesting constantly. And then the factories start paying, and the last, even today, workers are getting wages. 2 days ago, worker was protesting in the street or in front of the factory to get wages. So when we say number, like 90% factory has been paid, that is not beginning of the month. That is just 2 days ago. But still, many workers yet to get paid for their month, wages of March.
Okay, thank you for that information. I was also interested because, BCWS and FEMNET together are doing a project on gender-based violence, and we are mainly working on women's rights in the garment sector. So I was wondering whether you can talk a little bit about how women are especially affected by the crisis now. I think Kalpona is muted.
I'm on mute now. Okay.
Okay.
So yeah, the project we are running with FEMNET is called multi-stakeholder project, and we are together working on to prevent the gender-based violence at workplace here in Bangladeshi government sector and government factories. So we are planning to have anti-harassment committees in the factory, and also lobby and have a new law, and also lobby with government to ratify ILO Convention C-190. So it all was we are doing, and we are educating our workers about raising their voice against this gender-based violence. And one of the bigger chunk of work we did under this project that to break the ice, because the cultural taboo never give a chance to our workers to speak up, or women to speak up about the violences they've been facing in their factory, in their community, and in the commute. But this project was helping us enormously, bringing this women voice in the front line, and they started to speak up. So when we had this, chance and getting our women voice to hear, but we are in the same time facing this pandemic, and this pandemic has been increased the women's, the different kind of violence, like the violence in their which we can say domestic violence, like they're now more exposed to their husband or partners at home. I mean, more time they're spending together. So when they're spending time together, and in the same time, when they don't have stability in their life, like they don't know when they will get wages, they don't know that whether they will have food for next day or not, so the tension grows. And these tensions bring, more violence towards to women. So first of all, in the Bangladeshi garment factories, that majority of them are female workers. And this, when we say that the workers haven't paid, which is mean that majority of these women workers are not being paid. So the violence, they're now facing two kinds of problem. One is that instability of economical instability, which just means doesn't have money to buy food and protect themselves or pay for medical, but in the same time they're facing the domestic violence as well. So this is the situation of our women at this moment.
Thanks so much for reporting, Kalpona. I think if there's no direct questions from the audience now in terms of understanding, then I would hand over to Deepika. Jana, I think there is, now I see one.
There's one question
Yes.
that came in, and it says, I was wondering whether there is an increase of mouthguard production. What material are they made of? Is the material less healthy than normal cloth textiles? And under what condition do women have to work? How are they protected from the virus?
Kalpona, you're muted. Yeah.
Yeah. So you mean the personal protection equipment, right?
Exactly. It says mouthguard production and what materials exactly.
Okay, so we don't have much idea about the materials because we all are working from home. But as I know that these folks, I mean, I really don't want it to, I really do want it to say that the workers, those are making this PPE, they're definitely hero, because they are making this for our frontline responders in Bangladesh and in other countries as well, making these goods. I don't have any idea what are the materials are, because we cannot see them directly. But as I heard that the factories are keeping that quality, so it is not hard to our frontline responder like doctors and the healthcare workers to expose to the virus. So I think they're using very good materials, because our doctors also started using those personal protection equipment. And in terms of that, how these workers are being protected when they're working in that factory, I mean, I haven't seen, but what we heard, through cross-checking, when we also raise our concern that our workers, our women workers need to be protected as well when they're working. So some of the factory has been reorganized, putting workers keeping the distance in between, whatever the distance they're supposed to maintain. They're working in that way, as not all the factory, like if one factory has 2,000 workers, not necessarily that 2,000 workers are making the PPE. It is, less than 30% workers are working, or 20%, 40% working onto making personal protection equipment. So there is a distance maintaining and protecting them. But, if you ask me that, do I have a first-hand information? Difficult to say for this moment when we are working from home.
Thank you. There's another question we got. It says, if most workers got paid now for the month of March, will they get any salary in May for April, although they did not work?
That's a very good question. Okay, so we were in a difficult situation to get answer to that as well. But in the last month, in the very last week of last month, in March, the government announced a bailout money for export-oriented factory workers, which is like $500 million, or half a billion euros, I should say. So that bailout money, first we thought it's an incentive, but lately we came to know that it is not incentive. It's a very low interest loan that factory will get. Factory has to apply for, and factory has to submit workers' wages list and also workers' bank account. Then the bank directly will send that money to the workers' bank account. So that was the understanding. Then factories started doing the layoff. So when factories started doing the layoff, the government came with another announcement that factory those has been laid off, they will be not get access to this fund. As a labor activist, I would say it's a very good decision the government has been taken, because we don't want our factory to lay off. We want our workers to get their full month of wages. So answer to your question that whether workers will get paid for this month in the first week of May, we are trying our best. We are working with the manufacturers, we are working with the government, and we are hoping that the workers will get paid. But very clear message we will get end of this month or very first 2-3 days of next month, that whether workers are going to get paid or not. But we definitely will use all our best communication with the government, with the manufacturers, to make sure to our workers get paid. And from your part of the world, I think you also ask the branded retailers that they have to make sure that our workers get paid for this month, even the factory was closed.
Thanks so much, Kapuna. I think we would hand over now to Deepika to also hear about what is happening in India. I'm going to share Deepika's presentation, and Deepika, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thanks, Sina. Good morning to everyone present. I would just quickly take you all through the situation in India, the political situation in response to coronavirus, and the effect that has had on the textile industry and its workers, and what CVDEP and some of our local partners have been involved in the relief efforts. The country, these figures are from this morning, that we have 23,000 cases and over 700 deaths. The country has been under a month-long lockdown and since 24th of March, and we are currently in the second phase of a lockdown, which will extend up to 3rd May, with restrictions likely to be eased up in places which have a lesser number of cases. What the lockdown has looked like is basically that only essential services have been allowed to operate, like manufacturing, transport and sale of medicines, groceries, and fuel and other essential items. And other than that, basically all industries, other than probably the medical industries, media professionals and the police. Everything else was shut down on 24th of March with very, very little notice. And you can see from the pictures that it has what it looks like is deserted roads and a large number of police personnel present on the streets to enforce the lockdown. Next slide, please. Yeah. So what the lockdown has also been marked with is thousands of workers, migrant workers, have come to the streets and have started to make their way back home immediately as soon as the lockdown was announced. Because there were no public transport present, there was no public transport functioning. They were forced to make the journey on foot and the journey was like it's for several hundred kilometers from their destination states and cities like Delhi, Mumbai, back to villages in different states. And what accounts of migrant workers have said, what drove them out of these cities is one is the fear of contracting the virus because they lived in very congested quarters and accommodations. And the second was also that when there was a sudden clamp down on their income, the daily wage that they otherwise earned by either selling by street vending or by doing odd jobs, daily wage, driving of rickshaws, construction work. So many workers depended on daily wage, and that wage, when that stopped, they just found it unviable to continue living in the city and sought familiarity in their hometowns and villages. So this has been really the story across India, where several thousand workers decided to make their way back to familiarity and comfort in the times of crisis, with very little food and water, and children and along with them on the way. When we come to the textile industry, the next slide, please. In the textile industry, it's the second largest employer in India after agriculture, and it employs over 100 million people, directly or indirectly. And the industry itself is made up of many micro, small, and medium enterprises. And these are the enterprises which have been the worst hit by the supply chain disruptions that have happened internationally as well as within the country because of the virus spread. And there has been a sudden drop in demand internationally, and the national lockdown, and so a complete stop on transportation of goods and people. So these micro, small, and medium enterprises are the ones which have been disproportionately hit, and by some sources, maybe more than a fourth of them may not reopen once the lockdown is lifted. And up to 10 million jobs might be lost in the garment and textile industry. How the industry, government and the industry has responded. Government has appealed to the industry to not lay off workers and to not cut salaries, but the industry has in turn turned around and asked the government for help in paying wages, because they cannot pay wages in the face of cancelling international orders, fall in domestic demand as well as international demand, and such a huge large-scale disruption of the supply chains. The government has also responded by a likely push for labor law changes, like pushing for making it legal to have 12-hour work days, which of course the trade unions have strongly protested against. Next slide, please. The situation in Bangalore. So Bangalore, the situation is slightly easing up now, with some factories getting back to work. They are working. They've been allowed to work with up to 50% capacity, while maintaining all safety and hygiene requirements. If we look at the workers, many of them have been paid for the month of March, But some of them we continue to, Government Labor Union continues to track the situation, that many of them continue to be still unpaid. The workers who have been paid have only been paid for the work for the days that they worked, and not for the days that they did not work. So we fear the worst for the entire month of April, that the workers haven't worked at the factory. There is the garment workers were already very precarious workers, with low wages and long hours, and unstable contracts, and they had their own, and they come with vulnerabilities of gender, with in Bangalore 80% of them being women, and their migrant status also adding to their vulnerability. And the spread of this virus has really deepened these insecurities and vulnerabilities. And if they are called to work, there is a very deep fear that they will contract the virus, and then they will go on to infect their families as well. And then how do they deal with the medical requirements that the disease brings, with the treatment of the disease requires. And if they don't go to work, then there is the fear of job loss. And literally there is a very little saving, or practically no saving, to fall back on in times such as these. Like Kalpana already mentioned, that we are also witnessing a spike in domestic violence cases being reported to the union. There is a need for urgent health awareness to be given out to the workers, making it easier for them to access affordable and nutritious food, because that is really something that the workers are struggling with currently. Also trying to assuage the fears about job loss, because that is very real, the fear. A lot of these workers also come from single headed households, where their incomes are the only ones. Even if there is another income of their husband, that also comes from another low wage work, which is also as hit, if not badly, if not more worse than garment work has been hit in these times, like construction work, or informal work such as an electrician or a plumber, or street vending. So the workers are really facing the worst of the brunt of this crisis. Migrant workers, again, the fear, along with all of these fears that all the workers are facing, they also live in very cramped accommodations, and there is a risk of there's a very heightened risk of the virus spread amongst migrant workers. Next slide, please. We are in the short run, we are trying to provide immediate relief to workers, because that is something that is just needed for survival. Help with dry rations, with cash transfers for rent, any support that they may need to stay back in the city and pursue employment when the factory is open. That is something that we're trying to do for workers. We're trying to also give awareness about the health precautions that they should take, and connecting workers also to government relief and support agencies. For the long term, we are tracking. We will be conducting surveys on an ongoing basis to understand the conditions in which workers are trying to cope with this situation. Their access to various schemes and entitlements that the government has announced, and also documenting and analyzing the situation as to how exactly is the industry going to get back on its feet and also respond to this crisis, because this is something that we feel is this will have a very long-term effect on the industry itself and the workers. We are anticipating massive job losses or loss in income, and we are trying to see what we can do in supporting the workers in countering such situations, like legal aid or just support to stay back in the city of work. That is all from my side. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Deepika. Are we having a question, Jana, to Deepika?
Yes, there are some questions. We also have some questions from the YouTube chat. For the listeners there, we will address the ones who have been for Bangladesh in the end of our discussion. As for now, we have a question on payments by mobile phone. What about workers who do not have mobile payment accounts?
In our experience, most workers have a basic mobile phone. If it is, even if it may not be a smart phone, they have access to a mobile phone account. And we did this just so that they are able to communicate with their families. They are also able to communicate in case they are looking for jobs, if they've lost their jobs, and just to get information on government schemes. So this was something that we felt was very essential, and that is why, and in our experience, the mobile coverage, mobile access is quite widespread amongst workers.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And then there was another question. This is now also from YouTube. Do you have any positive examples of any brand's response to the situation that could be shared to inspire other brands?
As of now, we've only seen promises by brands where they have said that they will not cancel orders. But it's really still early to say this, because say whether they will follow through with their promise, because like I said, and we have been seeing that workers have been paid. Most workers have been paid for the month of March. The April month is what is more crucial, and what follows after that, once the lockdown is eased and workers get back to work. What follows, and how how they are treated after that. So we're still waiting and watching. We do not have any instances to share as of now.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Then there is one other question. Is there any central support by the state with food packages, vouchers that can be accessed from anywhere in the country, regarding that some of the migrant workers are not getting to the home villages to make use of the decentral offers?
Yes, so the government has been distributing ration through its usual public distribution system, the PDS system, which even on a normal, even during normal times, would distribute subsidized food grains. But this was only available for workers who were registered as domicile workers of that state. And usually we've seen that migrant workers do not have access to such cards, which are required for this. But the government in this situation realized that the risk is more for migrant workers, and has gone to some length to make sure that migrant workers are also receiving the food. So we've had quite an active response from the government agencies, but the problem is that the demand is too huge, and the government machinery is also slow and bureaucratic at times. So civil society organizations have stepped in large numbers, actually, to mitigate the crisis for the workers and provide some immediate interim relief, at least. Yes.
Thanks so much, Deepika. I think that's a good opportunity to actually hand over to Mary to get a perspective from a different state of India. Mary, there is your video. Maybe you could unmute your microphone, and I'm going to share my screen again. Maybe we can, before I show and solve these technical issues, Mary, you could also talk about a little bit the migrant workers, because I think this is something that in Tamil Nadu is a very important issue, and maybe you can explain a little bit what is the difference between the situation in Bangalore and in Tamil Nadu.
Yes, good afternoon to one and all. I mean, Tirupur has, there are two kinds of migrants. One is interstate migrants, second one intra-state migrants. They are coming from other districts of Tamil Nadu. But at present, both of them are suffering for food materials or food. Government machinery is also taking efforts in the later part to supply the food materials for interstate migrants and intrastate migrants. But as you all aware of it, the demand is very, very high. That is why the problem is very huge in these cities. The migrants want two things. One, the food material they want immediately. Second thing, they are having a lot of anxiety to go home. These two things are, we could see very visibly because since I'm in the ground always. Related to the wage situations, no work, no payment. Until 22nd, whoever worked until 19th or 20th of March, they have received the wages. The other days, they did not, during the lockdown period, no one received wages. It is the highest challenge for the workers to feed their children or feed their feed themselves is the highest challenge. Since we are getting a lot of calls, around every day we get a 200 calls, maybe the single calls or the group calls. We are getting to provide the food materials. We are doing in three ways. One is we ourselves are directly distributing the food materials, which consist of rice, dal, onion, potato, the washing soap and the protective materials. These are all the things we are providing them directly. Second thing, we are associating with the government. Wherever they are doing it, we are also partially contributing with the government to distribute as much as possible workers to reach out. Third, we are referring the workers to different helpline number which is existing at present scenario, especially for the COVID-19, to reach out and asking some of the helps. There are some critical cases they wanted to go home. They can get a permission from the administrative office and they can go. This provision only for Tamil Nadu state because there is no train facilities. If any workers wanted to go home, other district, then we are guiding them to go and get the token and then they can go for very emergency situations. And there are, as Deepika mentioned, MSME is a very worst vulnerable situations. I would say everyone is, but these are all workers are no work, no payment. This is the situation is existing over here. The most affected is contract workers. No contractor is ready to support even a small amount of money. Also, no one is ready to give any of the workers. They are 100%, or I would say 80 to 100%. They are depend on any one of the materials from either government or from us. That's why it's the cruelty is very, very high for them.
Okay, thanks, Mary, for this first impression. You also send us some pictures of the relief work that SAFE is doing, and maybe I can show some of them and you can comment on them a little bit. to describe what exactly SAFE is doing to support workers in this situation.
Okay, the first photograph, I mean, this is on the scenario in the screen. I mean, these are all the workers coming from Andhra state, I mean, neighboring Andhra, Karnataka, these days, even Orissa and Maharashtra. These are all staying in this compound. There are around 323 I mean, totally 323 persons are in this surroundings, which we have started our distribution from this hamlets. I mean, living pockets. Next slide. This is this is another compound. You have to see these are all the workers from Odisha. Now, most of the workers are coming from Odisha through some of the centers, government training center. So these people are calling to that training center, asking the help for them. So we are also getting these kind of calls from other district and other some of the government officials also directing us to go and help this community. This is the one of the street where we are supplying the food materials. You can see this is they are staying in the dyeing industry. They were called last 3 days, they do not have any food, even all these children. We have got from the call that they do not, but they are not able to call, they do not have a number also. Because when the other building opposite to this, there are some building, they called us to help these people. So we have distributed them. Now we are going to distribute third time to provide food for them. This is the one scenario we could say. There are several scenarios like this. These workers are from Bihar and West Bengal. These workers are now 4th time they are calling again. A 4th time we have to go and distribute because they do not have even a single money in their pockets to purchase anything. Though the shop is opened, but they are not able to go and purchase anything. So completely they are depending on our support. One time we are supporting, next time the government is coming and we are linking with the government. After that also it is not sufficient. Again, we are supporting, we are combination of both with the government and ourselves. We are doing this services that you can see the children. This is the guy without his wife. He is in the home. He has to take care of these children. He does not have any food materials to feed these children. This is home wise we are going and distributing it.
Thanks so much, Mary, for sharing this. Jana, do we have a question for Mary?
Yes, we have a question that is, if you could please explain what type of contract the contract workers have, and do the migrants have mobile phones in Tamil Nadu? But maybe this is two different questions. So let's first address the type of contract and maybe also the situation of informal workers.
Yes.
Thank you.
I mean, the contract workers, all the workers are working in any one of the garment industry, but the payment will not be done by the principal employer. They will get from the contractors, labor contractor. Now, no labor contractor is picking up the call to support them. And some of the contractors, labor contractors are already, I mean, Tamil Nadu labor contractors are already left to their homes. So they are in the helpless situations. the another aspect also I have to say.
Sorry, Mary, can I ask one question, whether I understood this right? So you say that many of the workers are actually employed through agents, and that the agents are the ones who pay for the wages rather than the factories themselves. Is that right?
No, it is not an agent. Labor contractors. The one contractor have 20 workers or 200 workers or 300 workers. So the labor contractor have to pay the payment for 20 workers or 200 workers or 300 workers. The wage he has supposed to get from the principal employer. Now the principal employer situation, he is not able to pay anything. Since the inception of this lockdown period itself, our employer associations openly says, and again they are reminding the government to pay the lockdown cost for the workers. For that they are saying the reason that already both of them, Kalpana and Deepika, told that the shipped goods are not received by any of the retailers or brands. And the orders also, it has been cancelled some of the way. So they are calculating all this amount. Already the employers are in the loss of situation. So they don't want to pay the lockdown period wages.
Okay, thanks so much. So Jana, what was the second question? It was whether Tamil Nadu workers have mobile phones. Is that right?
Yes. I mean, most of the workers are having the mobile phone.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so thank you very much for your report on what you're doing. I mean, it's really important work, and this is why FEMNET also reacted quite quickly when you called out to us and informed us about this situation. You were among the very first to, call out and call for help for the garment workers who were more or less starving. So this is why we established an emergency relief fund for garment workers that also supports the work of SAFE. So to those of you who wish to financially contribute and donate for the work of our partners, please go ahead and donate to the Corona Relief Fund. So Gisela, you had the idea to set up this emergency relief fund in order to quickly support workers in this time of crisis. And I mean, of course, the immediate response to workers in need is really important. However, structural changes are also needed to avoid situations in which workers are dependent on charity in the future. So what do you think we in the consumer countries can learn from this crisis in order to work towards such structural improvements? Please unmute your mic, and I will show some slides you prepared for going into detail on this question.
Yes, okay. Oh, thank you so much also to all of you, Deepika, Mary, and Kalpona, for presenting us the situation, explaining us the situation in your countries. I really would like to point out what are, first of all, the consequences of the corona pandemic, and later on our demands. And as Sina said, there is on one hand the actual demand for a relief fund, which we have set up, but for sure what we need to have are structural changes. And we can see really since many years nothing has happened. Very little progress has happened on the worker social and economic rights. We still don't have sufficient high wages. Even the minimum wage is only paid, and we all know that this is not sufficient for survival. That's why workers do overtime in a huge amount. But there's also what we can see now in this situation, there is no social protection. Carpona already mentioned it. There is no social protection in terms of unemployment schemes, or Provident Fund in India is also only happening to a certain extent. So I think that is something which should be a lecture for us. There needs to be an improvement or a change in the future. And what we can also see now in this crisis, this is the same also, by the way, in Germany, I think it's mostly women who are suffer the most, because they have the triple burden. They are not now locked in the room, sometimes with with husbands violating them. So domestic violence is increasing. We see that everywhere in the world. We have seen in Bangladesh that there were quite a lot of billions of orders cancelled by our buyers. That is affecting more than half of the working population in the textile factories, and we feel that it is really now the time for buyers, German buyers, European buyers, American buyers, to show solidarity and not transfer all the responsibility to the suppliers, for sure. We recently learned in a McKinsey study that most of the buyers try now to negotiate the conditions of their orders again. And more or less 50% of all orders seem to be renegotiated, which means that they try to get a price reduction, or the extension, the time for payment has been extended. There are a lot of ways how they can try to change these orders, and we feel this is not correct, because they really have to stick to their old terms and conditions, how they have negotiated the orders in the beginning, before the Corona crisis. Okay, and I think after Corona, it should be made sure really that payment of the goods of the textile clothes must cover all costs, especially living wages necessary to be paid, all types of benefits, social security scheme, the safety, all this should be paid. And there are different models already being discussed. One is to have an additional charge levied on the FOB, on the free on board price, but there are also other measures that one can think of. And above all, I feel what we need to have is a rethinking of the business model. We can see that there is overproduction in the world, in our world, in the Western world. The clothes can't be worn anymore. It's much too much in the world what we have. And we have, all this affects the environment, our earth, and the exploitation of workers is behind that. And we think, why is happening all this if we finally don't wear the clothes, and if we continue with this type of business model? That has to be changed. Less production needs to be produced, but under fair conditions, healthy conditions, and conserving our earth. So please, next slide, Sina. So what does that mean for our demands? So first of all, what we ask for is that workers' income is protected and their health is protected. So brands must publicly commit to a responsible sourcing strategy. That means that they should also publicly, and that is important, that they publicly commit to it, and not only saying it or in general terms, but have to publicly show on their website, for example, that they will pay all the orders completed or in production, and that they don't ask for new price negotiations, that they don't cancel their orders, that production times could be extended, for example, and also that if in case of delay, that there shouldn't be any sanctions by the buyers. Okay, payment of wages, as I said, is necessary. Also, severance payments is necessary, and for sure, workers should not be fired. We have learned now that quite a lot of them in Bangladesh, I heard about it at least, have been fired. And finally, the health has to be protected if production takes place. As far as I know, in Bangladesh, some factories are working. I think in India, only very, very few, nearly none of them are working. And those who work, then they will produce special products for clothing for the coronavirus. But what we need now, if for example, the factories start again, so they need to have personal protective equipment. There must be physical distancing. So now normally one sewing worker is sitting behind the other. That needs also, there must be created a distance between them. And also on the way to the work, as often transport is organized by companies, one need to pay attention of keep distance and protect workers' health. And for emergency relief, I think what is really needed, apart from we have started as FEMNET a very small fund, but for sure our possibilities are limited. So what we really need to have is contributions from multilateral institutions, donor governments, and brands to all finance a kind of relief fund. There are already discussions going on. We know that from our German government that they are doing it, and we hope that this is really starting soon. So on a short term, such a relief fund is necessary in order to give credits and loans to provide quick income. But on a long term, we need to have social protection floors for workers. As I said before, unemployment benefits need to be build up, social security systems. So if the next pandemic comes, all the systems are better prepared and workers don't need to suffer as they are doing now. And finally, what we need, I think, is all these measures are on a voluntary basis, but what is nearly needed is a mandatory human rights due diligence. That means that we need to have a legislation. Here in Germany, we are discussing especially the so-called Lieferkettengesetz. So it is necessary that the German government provides a framework, the legal framework for mandatory human rights due diligence, and which also includes that factory or buyers can be pursued in court in case they are not fulfilling their due diligence. And we also would need that at a European level, and in other European countries, France already has such a law, but at EU level, it would be great to have such structure. Okay, that's for the moment, I think, very much. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Gisela. Jana, do we have a question directly to Gisela?
Yes, there's a question to Gisela. It says, is FEMNET actively engaging with brands to not cancel the orders?
Yes, we do. We do. We have written to especially to the members of the German Textile Partnership. We have asked them, and we to publicly also commit and to announce that they are not canceling orders. So this we are doing within the German Textile Partnership. But I think with also together with the Clean Clothes campaign, we will start more and more demanding companies to declare themselves, and especially not to stop orders, but to continue with orders and to pay those orders that are already be given to the suppliers.
Thank you. Then we have general questions that came in to all speakers. So to Zina, you decide if we can start the open discussion.
Yes, I think actually that question is great to start and get an idea of a vision kind of after Corona. So maybe you can read out that question.
Exactly. So we have collected many thanks to all your questions from YouTube and here in the webinar. I would start with a question to Kalpuna. So it says that the governments are planning to opening after the 26th of April with only 50% of workers. So the question is, what about the rest? And we can also maybe couple this with another question. If it is allowed for factories to lay off workers while the government has ordered a national lockdown that is supposed to operate legally as a national holiday.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah, I have seen a few other questions as well regarding the mobile phone and everything. So I'll be responding to all of them together. So, you know, having 50% workers and opening the factory from next week and onward, you know, whatever they do, we definitely want our full workers to get paid from each factory. So why they have, you know, why government or BGME says to open with 50% factories? Because many of the workers just left for their village houses. So if they come now, there is a high percentage of them to get, you know, infected by the virus or, you know, getting the virus spread. So that's the reason why it been says with the 50% worker should work now, and especially those are now living in the industrial area, they should be working. But it is so difficult to choose because, you know, all workers do not work in every section and they are not skilled for every work. So I don't know, it is BGME has to decide or factory has to decide how they will define this 50% worker. But our demand is very clear that it is 30% or 20% worker, it doesn't matter, but our 100% worker has to be get paid. So this is one. And second, when you know the government has been called for a lockdown, and then how the factories are you know doing laid off. I mean that is definitely, you know, the factories went beyond the government decision. They are not exactly following the government decision, which is like violating the law, of course. Okay, so that is why the government is already says that, you know, factory those has been laid off, they will be not getting access to bailout money, bailout loan money. So I think this is one initial step that government has been taken. But we also heard that while the BGMEA, the Manufacturers Association, submit an application to the government that they wanted to call a, you know, a laid off for 100% factories, like all factories, they wanted to call a laid off, not a holiday, because holiday will make them pay a full payment and the laid off will make them pay less. So they wanted to call it laid off, but government, we had in a backdoor government said no, they are not agree with it. So still the situation is the government in a position, the factory cannot lay off and they cannot pay. But few of the union, like we are working with them and we already submit a application to the government. There is a level of provisions called 324 to apply that at this moment. If government apply that, you know, provision, so the, you know, so they can call few provisions that, you know, makes workers to get fired, retrenched, dismissed, terminate. I mean, those provision can be postponed for few months or for time being. Okay, so we have requested government to announce that. So we really don't know that how far it will go, but we are back and forth with government. The other, you know, respond to the, you know, one had a question that how many workers has bank account, or whether all workers got bank account, how, you know, it will work, how workers wages will be transferred. So till yesterday, we have been heard about 2 million workers already opened the bank account after pandemic, you know, after the virus breakout in the country. So there is a, you know, all of us, the government itself, they are going through the national television asking asking workers to open the bank account. And the opening mobile bank account is not too tough, it is easy. So they can do that, and it is increasing pretty much every day. So workers opening the bank account and submitting to the factory, but few factory making difficult workers' life. Well, like, if workers open the mobile bank account, then factory asking, oh, you need to go XYZ bank and open the bank account up there. But then we are getting into the scene and we're saying, no. For this moment, you have to work with this. So we are also encouraging our workers to open up the bank account. If the workers left, yet they have not, opened the account, then, that's a difficult position, decide how workers will get wages. But we definitely, ask the manufacturers and government to find a way so our workers at least get payment. So I think these are the questions so far I have seen. And also I have seen another question. It says that, whether it will be similar kind of production or order will be getting our countries will getting after the lockdown, or, when situation is normal. I mean, in response to that question that we really don't know. I mean, it will be a different world, I think, where we will be stepping in few months from now. Maybe the consumer will be more conscious, but in the same time, they will be asking the brands to pay a fair amount of money. So workers, if they even lose job, I mean, maybe many of them will be losing job. There will be not same scale of workers that we have. Like we have 4.2 million now. Maybe there will be less. But in many cases, our workers, husband and wife, both working in the garment industry, both of them working because one person earning is not enough. But in the coming days, coming months, when pandemic will be not there, if life become normal, maybe consumers choose not to buy fast fashion. Maybe they choose differently. I mean, definitely we want them to choose differently. I mean, fast fashion doesn't help. That kills, many things. That kills our mother Earth. I mean, it has been affect many ways to us. So what we want, buy a sustainable clothes, but in the same time pay enough, and also make sure that when you pay enough, the workers get a fair share of it. If you even pay big, but the brand do not pay enough to the manufacturers, and manufacturers do not pay enough to workers, that will not help. So as a consumer, when you are choosing to buy sustainable clothes, we want them to do that. But in the same time, make sure you pay enough, and that share, fair share goes to the worker. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You have answered lots of questions. That is fantastic. We have some more that I would address to Deepika maybe. There is an eager interest to understand what kind of labor contract exists, and how is the percentage of labor leasing, and what is the situation with the contractors? What is their control considering to the workers, and how much percentage do they receive from the salary of the workers? Just maybe give us some context.
So Bangalore is a lot more, the garment industry here is a lot more formalized than it is in Delhi and in Tirupur. So we see mostly large factories over here, which form the first tier of the fast fashion industry. So we've mostly seen permanent contracts, permanent worker contracts, but now also an increasing trend towards leaning towards contracting, subcontracting, and piece rate workers. So the large chunk of workers, women workers, are directly employed by factories. And these factories, like I shared before, it's a mixed, that some of them have paid, some of them have paid the entire salaries, some of them have only paid for the days that they worked. The smaller factories, factories which are not under so much scrutiny, probably will escape under the radar by not paying the entire wages and not paying any wages for April. Contractors, we have seen, we've heard this from across industries, not just garment industry, but across industries, that contractors are just not reachable to workers. Right at the time when they need, when the workers need them to be there and support them in an alien city, contractors are missing, and I mean, they haven't heard from their own paymasters. So contractors are missing, and they're not able to respond to demands of the workers for wages or for food relief or any of it. Daily piece rate workers and home workers, of course, I don't think they even expect any relief from their employers. So that's the situation.
Yeah, but the situation in Tamil Nadu is different. So I think Mary should probably better be able to answer to that question. Mary?
Mary, then
Yeah.
please share your insights with us.
Yes. In Tirupur, around 30 to 40% only are the direct employment in the factories. The rest of them all either piece rate or contract under the contractors. Particularly, the interstate migrants are, I would say, around 80% are under the contract either or in the piece rate system. That is why the challenge is also very huge.
But Mary, how much, if a contractor now is paying the worker, how much does he keep for himself when he gets the money from the factory?
I'm not sure exactly how much. Sure, he will take it from 20% to 30%.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Then we have another question that is about the communication channels and strategies in Bangladesh for COVID-19 crisis management. What are the communication channels for the crisis management in Bangladesh? This goes to Kalpuna.
Kalpuna, you need to unmute yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question. What is the communication challenge you mean?
Yes, the question says, could you name some communication channels and strategies in Bangladesh for COVID-19 crisis management?
So not challenges, but channels, like I guess how the government is communicating to the population, things like that.
Okay, so yeah, the communication channels. So our Prime Minister comes to, the television, the national television, which is broadcast like pretty much every channels. She talks live with all the administrators, the district administrators. And through that, we also come to know that what are the government packages, what government, announcing. But if we talk about whether we are getting, like rather than Prime Minister, whether we are getting very clear information from other ministry as well, like especially from Health Ministry, no. There is a real difficulties that we get from the Health Ministry, like in terms of information. Most of the time, we really don't know that, though they do a briefing like pretty much every day, in the middle of the day, it says that how many person has been tested and how many new positive patient has been found, how many death has been done. But people has a distrust with that information, and people has a very angry, people are very angry, including me, because it's a very minimum test happening. Like a day, it is 3,000 maximum people getting tested. 3,000 plus we have just seen yesterday. So we are not getting a clear information why it is happening, whether it is inadequate kits or is there any strategy for that. So this is one difficulty that we are being facing. The government says that the government, the information they're disseminating by the television that the country is ready with all the medical support for the victims, those are facing the virus who need medicals. But the reality is different. Like when we are here, the people's story who was in the hospital, they're saying different stories to the media, to the social media. So these are like, the communication is, it's difficult out there. And in terms of, the food dissemination, like there is a lot of people, like daily laborers, they're facing a lot of problems because they don't have income, they need food. They need relief and food bags right away. The government is saying that they're disseminating a lot of foods, but people through the television, we come to know that, you know, the people are not getting that properly, or the proper distribution not happening. So that, yeah, so this is like difficult way with the difficulties that people are facing. And one other difficulties that we are facing, that, you know, working from home, it is very new thing for Bangladesh. We are really facing a lot of challenges, like internet is slow. We don't know that how to do that. We don't know, many of us not, you know, experienced to ordering, or, you know, online food, like online grocery. Maybe we did online, you know, order for food, like very ready food, but groceries or medicine, those wasn't like very common in the country. So those are the challenges that we are being facing, and it is very practical challenge for our workers as well, because they use most is phone, not the internet. So they are facing the, you know, communication challenges as well. And in terms of reaching out to the government with many issues, it is challenged, because we always used to give them a manually like application. We used to go to their offices, submit the application, getting a stamp on it. But now we are sending over email, but we really don't, I mean, we are not getting very quick response for them. We need to call them like few other time. So these are like challenges we are facing.
Thank you very much. We have one question directed to Gisela. How do you combine the reduction of production with the demand for not canceling orders now? What will happen to clothes produced now and not sold?
Okay, there I would think one needs to differentiate between first reaction and long-term reaction. I think on the short term, for sure, all this production is already there, so that needs to be somehow sold, and that's why I think it is absolutely necessary that buyers have to take the clothes that they have ordered and pay for it accordingly. And on the long run, we need to discuss how the type of how the amount of clothes can be reduced and should be produced more on a sustainable way. Also, as Kalpona has pointed out, I think in order to save our Mother Earth and to have better working conditions. And I would like also, because I see at the time that we are coming now to probably to the end, I would like to state once again the responsibility from the buyer side, and would like to mention some recent statements that have been produced. One is a statement which has been issued by the German Partnership for Sustainable Textiles, together with other multi-stakeholder initiatives. It's called Responding Responsibly to the COVID-19 Crisis. It is a kind of declaration where buyers are asked to have a responsible purchasing practice. It's not a kind of direct commitment by the brands, although this might come in a second stage. And there is another paper which has now come out by IndustriAll and some trade unions, as well as especially with big companies. Most of them organized in the ACT, who maybe some of you know about the ACT. So it's called COVID-19 Action in the Global Garment Industry. And there, at least, it is said brands and retailers commit to paying manufacturers for finished goods and goods in production. So if companies sign this, they will commit themselves to pay for these finished goods and goods in production. However, I also would like to mention here, nothing is mentioned about whether prices have been negotiated again or not. And I feel that is a must. because we know that nearly by McKinsey report, it was interesting to learn that about 50% of all buyers started renegotiating prices with the suppliers. So what I feel what is necessary, we need to have a commitment by brands in which they say they will take the finished goods in production and those in production, but to the conditions agreed upon in the beginning and not renegotiated again. And finally, a last paper I would like to mention, which is probably not very much known yet by most of you. That is a paper from the civil society, or it's called a Civil Society European Strategy for Sustainable Textiles, Garments, Leather and Footwear. And it is issued by more than 50 or 60 NGOs. It's a call on the EU to contribute to the upcoming comprehensive EU strategy for textiles in 2021. And it comprises a lot of themes and issues. And I feel this is a very good opportunity for us as NGOs to push the EU and to ask for other type of production, to look into the environment and to look into social issues. So that one is coming up, and I would like to everybody, we can make it public later on and or send you the link to the paper. And if others would like to sign, the more we are, the better. So thank you so much for that.
Thanks a lot, Gisela. And you're absolutely right. With a look at the time, we have to slowly come to an end. I just wanted to point out one more thing to you, is the link to the blog of the Clean Clothes campaign. It's a live blog on how the coronavirus influences workers in the supply chains. So for all of you who want to learn more about the situation of workers in the production countries, please follow this blog. It will show you all the news that you need to know. So yes, let me just finish here by saying that Rana Plaza was a so-called wake-up call to the garment industry, since people all over the world asked brands and retailers as well as governments to work towards better safety for garment workers. So I think now let all of us work together to make sure that this crisis will be a wake-up call to work towards a transformation in garment supply chains that directly benefits workers, that makes sure that brands pay up to workers, so that workers will no longer pay the price for a structural crisis of the fashion industry, and that this industry will never again leave workers so unprotected. So thanks a lot to everyone who participated, and of course, especially to our speakers today. Thanks so much for your inputs, and it was really interesting listening to you. Take care, and of course, stay healthy. We will also be updating our followers on Facebook and Instagram and via our newsletter about what CVDEP, BCWS and SAFE will be doing in the coming weeks. So thanks a lot, and also thanks a lot to the people on YouTube. I'm very happy that this worked out. It was the first time for us with all these technical issues. I was surprised that with streams from three different countries and participants from all over the world, this worked out so well. So yes, thanks a lot.